like many people, I was very relieved that the resolution failed. That might surprise some of your viewers, but the devil is in the detail. This was a very bad resolution written by the Palestinian Authority without any support from any other Palestinian factions. It's been condemned by Palestinian political figures and legal experts because in an attempt to avoid the American veto, it undercut and undermined and watered down very fundamental Palestinian rights. And if this resolution had passed, it would have superseded existing resolutions, which are far stronger. I'll give you just one example. In your headlines, you said this resolution calls for an end to the Israeli occupation. That's the headline, but in the small print, it does no such thing. It calls for a withdrawal of Israeli security forces, their replacement with a third-party presence, understood to mean American troops or NATO troops, and it allows for the Israeli settlements to remain behind. So it doesn't even call for settlements to be dismantled and withdrawn. That's why this resolution should not have passed and didn't. On the other hand, of course, the reason the US opposed it was not out of any concern for Palestinian rights, but out of the Obama administration's commitment, unfailing commitment to do everything possible to thwart the Palestinians, no matter how they pursue their struggle, whether through the UN or whether through exercising their legitimate right to self-defense and resistance. This is an American administration that exceeds all of its predecessors in its tenacity and zeal in opposing the Palestinians and helping Israel to occupy, dispossess, and kill them.
Speaking last week, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power explained why the U.S. objected to the UN resolution on Palestine.
Today's staged confrontation in the UN Security Council will not bring the parties closer to achieving a two-state solution. We voted against this resolution not because we are indifferent to the daily hardships or the security threats endured by Palestinians and Israelis, but because we know that those hardships will not cease and those threats will not subside until the parties reach a comprehensive settlement achieved through negotiations.
Phyllis Bennis, your response to what has taken place and its significance at the United Nations Security Council.
Thanks, Amy. I think that Ali Abunimah is absolutely right that this resolution would not have ended the occupation. It was also never going to pass, whether it was officially with a U.S. veto, if there had been 9 votes, or a U.S. no vote as a result of U.S. pressure to make sure there were not 9 votes. The U.S. was not going to let this pass. I think what's far more significant is the decision of the Palestinians, finally, after a great deal of pressure on the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, to sign the documents to join the International Criminal Court. That ultimately has far more consequence than does these kinds of resolutions in the Security Council. The possibility of the International Criminal Court, which is a weak agency right now, it's a thoroughly politicized agency, but it's moving forward in the world, and I think over time we will see the court playing a greater role in international diplomacy as well as in international jurisdiction over war crimes. The possibility that Israeli officials, and it isn't only military officials, as Prime Minister Netanyahu indicated, it could also be, and would certainly also be, political officials as well as military, because things like settlements are war crimes as well as the direct war crimes committed in Gaza. People like the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister are in the chain of command, so they would also be liable for being brought up on charges. Now, they may say, well, that'll never happen. Fine, let Israel join the International Criminal Court. Israel is, of course, one of the outliers, along with the United States and a few others, very few other countries that have refused to sign and ratify the court, to join the court, to place its own officials under the court's jurisdiction. If Israel is so convinced that they wouldn't have anything to fear, let them join and find out. But the fact that the Palestinians are joining an international institution is important both for the substance and because this UN initiative overall, including, frankly, the Security Council resolution as far as it went, are major attacks on the legitimacy of the so-called diplomacy under U.S. control that has failed for the last 24 years. That's, I think, very important. It's put a number of European countries in the position of saying, we're no longer going to accept the idea that Washington gets to call the shots in the United Nations on the question of Palestine, that we are no longer going to be able to play an international role, that only the U.S. can determine what is a legitimate or illegitimate move by the Palestinians to obtain freedom and independence and an end to occupation and apartheid. In that context, I think the importance is far more on the level of the willingness of some European countries, France comes to mind, to stand up to U.S. pressure, to say, you know what, the kind of diplomacy that the U.S. has controlled for so many years has failed. We need a different kind of diplomacy that starts with international law.